All right, guys. So we did chapter 4, we did chapter 5, chapter 6, somatic disorders. This one will be quicker than anxiety disorders. Um, so you've heard the term before in your life, oh, it's all in your head, it's all in their head. And we use that as a term to kind of dismiss what somebody's experiencing as not real or something that they can control because it's in their head. Um, with a somatic disorder, it is literally all in your head, and it is still very real. And one of the things that we as students of psychology really need to do is a better job helping people understand that psychological disorders are not something to be ashamed of and stigmatize over, and B, real. Because there's still a prevailing ignorance out there that these disorders are things that are just a sign of weakness on the person's part. When somebody's suffering from depression or PTSD or a somatic disorder, like we're going to talk about, like, oh, they need to just get over it. That's like telling somebody with a broken arm, like, well, just don't have a broken arm. It doesn't work that way. Okay. Very often there's changes that occur to the actual structure of the brain that go along with these disorders, and they don't just go away. Or sometimes, somebody maybe just needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and press on. But that's a different thing, right? Being tough and having grit and getting through something isn't the same as acknowledging that you have an actual disorder. And it is very possible to have an actual disorder and still have grit and move on with your life. I always like to say you can either choose to be a survivor, you can choose to be a victim. So, I know a lot of people with a lot of disorders who choose to be survivors and still move on with their life and do things. So I think we kind of owe it to those people to respect that and stop diminishing the psychological experience. That being said, somatic disorders literally are all in your head. So first, we gotta explain the difference between somatic disorder and malingering. Malingering is the fancy medical scientific term for faking. When somebody goes to the doctor and says, I have an illness, and they don't actually have the illness, they're malingering. When somebody, I don't know, let's say they're committing workers' comp fraud, right? They're saying, oh, I fell down, I hurt my back, you got to pay me to be off, right? But they're really not. They're going out, they're golfing, they're going to the gym, they're doing everything. They just don't want to work and they want to get paid for it. That's malingering, okay? That is intentionally faking a medical issue, all right? That is not the same as a somatic disorder, and we get that confused as a society. A somatic disorder at its core, and there's a bunch of different ones, but at its core means that you have an actual physical symptom. You have pain, you have tingling, you have numbness, you have sweats, you have whatever, you have nausea, you have some physical disorder, but it has a mental cause. And if I'm losing you here, let's just go back to panic disorders. Can you get so nervous that you get nauseous? Can you get so nervous, so worried, so afraid that your hands sweat, that your heart beats really fast? Does that? Yes, of course. We know that's part of the fight or flight response. When your mind perceives that threat, it causes your adrenal glands to do their thing. It causes your hypothalamus to do its thing. And boom, you're in fight or flight. And what is fight or flight? It's a whole bunch of actual physical symptoms that result from what happened in your mind. And what happened in your mind? Your mind perceived a threat. Okay? So the mind controls the body. Don't ever forget that. Okay? A somatic disorder is a physical symptom that originates with a psychological cause. Right? These disorders can be incredibly frustrating to the medical community because the medical community is a bunch of science-minded folks who want to find the biological causes for problems and help you get better. And when the problem is not biological, they very often scratch their heads and say, what the heck's going on here? Right? This leads a lot of somatic disorders to be diagnosed as malingering. Oh, they must be faking it. They got to be faking it because I can't find the biological root of this problem. The root may not be biological. The root may be psychological. how to tell the difference between somatic disorders and malingering? You can. In many cases, especially when we're dealing with pain-related somatic disorders, we can hook the person up to brain scans, and we can see the pain centers on the brain lighting up. And we know their actual nerves are actually experiencing pain. We just don't have a cause for it. Okay? So a somatic disorder is a real symptom that's occurring from a psychological root. All right? So the most basic of these is somatic symptom disorder. This is a person with some medical symptom. Something's wrong, right? They have a cough that won't go away. They have a pain in their hand. They have something, and it won't go away. And they go to the doc, and the doc gives them some treatment, and it helps for a little bit, but then they keep coming back, and they keep saying it's back, it won't go away, it's back, it won't go away. What's going on? And the doctor cannot find the reason for this particular symptom, this thing to occur. And sometimes it's isolated. Maybe it's just my hand. Sometimes it's my whole body hurts. I don't understand why my whole body hurts. And we cannot figure out why this is happening. And when it's a somatic disorder, what we find is there may be something in this person's life that is causing their body to psychologically create pain to avoid. Maybe they've got a job with a boss who isn't just a bad boss, but they are actually sexually harassing them, and it's really, really bad, and it's awful, and it's creating an actual psychological distress. And so all of a sudden, now the person can't type. They've got horrible carpal tunnel-like symptoms without carpal tunnel. They cannot type. We see the nerves lighting up. We know they've got it, but they do not have the shrunken carpal tunnels. We don't understand why it's happening, but now they can't type. What the heck's going on? This is their brain trying to protect them from the situation by creating an out for them to get out of the situation that's affecting them psychologically. It's a psychological symptom. This is a physical symptom created with a psychological basis. Unfortunately, that scenario I just gave you is way more simple than most somatic disorders are. Most somatic disorders have their root in childhood, and by the time this person finally makes it to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they have been through every frickin' doctor on whatever coast they live on, and they're already in their 30s or whatnot, and they are convinced that they have some magic disorder that science cannot explain. Have you ever met the person? Do you know the person? Maybe you are the person who has some problem, some medical problem that baffles medical science. Like doctors can't figure out why I have this. Doctors, I've been misdiagnosed so many times, and doctors just cannot figure it out what's going on with me. It's probably somatic at that point. It's probably not that you have some mysterious, unique, strange disease from the Amazon. It's probably that you have a somatic issue, right? For some reason, we are hesitant to accept that. It's not somatic. It's not psychological. There's nothing wrong. Why can't it be, right? But that comes back to us making judgments. Because we've been trained to believe that having a psychological disorder is somehow dirty or bad, and so we don't want to believe that could be the cause of it. So somatic symptom disorder, the most basic version of it. The mind is causing some type of symptom in the body. Medical science can't explain it. Conversion disorder, and remember we talked about Freud a little bit ago? Conversion disorder is actually one of the best arguments for Sigmund Freud's theories that there is. Conversion disorder basically is the body creating some type of illness, some type of set of symptoms based on a psychological trauma. So this person experienced something not quite PTSD level trauma, but they experienced some type of trauma. Maybe they they got fired from a job, and it really impacted them financially. They lost their house or something like that. And while they're trying to cope with it, while they're trying to deal with it, while they're trying to all of a sudden, find new work, all of a sudden they end up with absolute loss of feeling in their hands. They go to the doctor and they can't feel their hands anymore. And they can't work their hands won't do anything anymore. They can't find another job. They have to stay on unemployment. They can't, and their life is falling apart and they don't know what's going on. This is probably conversion disorder. The impact and trauma of losing the job, the fear of inadequacy of finding another job, the stress associated with finding another job, the body is taking and unconsciously processing and saying, we can protect you from this, we'll give you a reason to not have the job or find a job. And so it creates this symptom. That symptom, by the way, is called glove anesthesia, the paralysis or loss of feeling in the hands. And there is no medical cause for that. So it is medically not possible for a person to just be paralyzed in their hands without some other affected. That's not the way the nerves work in the body. Something else should be affected, the upper arm, something else, right? Parts of the face, something. Just the hands from the wrists up? Nope. When you see that, then you know that you're dealing with a psychological root. Is it happening? Yeah, we can check. We can poke them with pins and stuff. It's not responding. But the causes are not physical. Okay, very, very similar to somatic symptom disorder, but kind of on a grander scale. Illness anxiety disorder, also called hypochondria, or used to be called hypochondria. This is the person who always believes themselves to be sick, no matter what. This is the person who's on frequent flyer miles at their doctor's office. They are constantly going to the doctor, believing they are sick. They have some life-threatening disease, and the doctors are stupid because they can't find it, and they're going to keep going to doctors and doctors and doctors till they find somebody who will help them deal with whatever disease it is that they believe themselves to have. And in this particular case, this will be a set of symptoms that align with a particular disease. Could be cancer, could be heart disease, could be something. But when we do tests, we don't find any of the things that should go along with it. Like if it was diabetes, we don't find the elevated A1C, we don't find glucose anomalies, we don't find anything like that. And yet they're showing the outward symptoms of having diabetes, right? And so they're going to keep going to the doctor no matter what. And every time they sneeze, every time they feel a tickle in their throat, they're back at the doctor and they believe that they're dying. And what will happen is, if they find a physician that kind of buys into what's going on, then they will kind of lock onto that person and they will start to get better. Right? They'll start to get better until a stressor occurs in their life, or that physician is like, okay, well, I think we're done now. We're cured. And then all of a sudden the symptoms will start coming back. The difference between this and just plain faking it is that they are not intentionally trying to fake these symptoms. They honestly believe that they have these symptoms. This is a belief in these symptoms versus I'm going to fake this doctor out. Okay. The last one is actual malingering. Actually, it's not the absolute last one, but malingering is faking it. And you have to, for some of these, you're like, okay, well, that kind of all sounds like the same thing. Well, no, you see, in the one, the person's actually experiencing symptoms. They just don't seem to have a physical cause. And the other one, they think, they truly believe they're sick, right? And we can't convince them that they're not sick. They actually believe they're sick. In malingering, they know they're not sick. They don't actually have symptoms. They're faking it. Okay, that's not a psychological disorder so much as it is being a jerk. Okay, and this is usually almost always done for criminal purposes, for insurance fraud or workers' comp fraud or those kind of things. But we have to cover it because you have to be able to tell the difference if you're dealing with a physical disorder, a somatic disorder, or malingering. right? Because if it's somatic disorder, then you need to treat the mind. If it's malingering, then you need to treat the crime. Okay? All right. Dissociation is put under the somatic disorders, but it's kind of over here on its own thing. Dissociation is a separation of the psychic or psychological consciousness from the physical body. And everybody's experienced at some point a slight dissociative experience where you just kind of like feel detached from reality for a moment. For most people, it's a very brief sort of thing. Sometimes when people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, they can experience that dissociation where they don't really, I'm not talking in a spiritual way, but their mind leaves the reality of the present and goes back to wherever it was they were. Okay. So I'm not talking about a spiritual soul leaving the body, but the mind leaves and they dissociate from what's going on around them. There's a thing called dissociative amnesia that occurs commonly with traumatic events, PTSD, very common, where somebody may be involved in a very traumatic event and they dissociate during the event. The brain literally takes their mind out of the event. Their body's still doing the thing, but their mind is not home. And when the event is over and you ask them what happened, they say, I don't know. I have no freaking clue what happened. And that is because their psychological consciousness literally shut off during the event. When I was a police officer, I was involved in a lethal force incident. I was involved in a gunfight. And afterwards, they were interviewing me because they have to interview you and find out what was going on. They interviewed me and they were asking me specific questions. What, how many times did you fire? And where was he? And where were you? And where was your partner? And to many of these questions, I had no idea. I was shocked that I could not answer these questions. I had no freaking clue. And it depended on my partners and the cameras and stuff. And so when you see these things occur and people who are involved in traumatic events saying, I don't remember, the ignorant will often say, well, you should remember, it was such an important event. Well, no, that's not how it works. Sometimes the brain, in an effort to protect itself, will cause that dissociative amnesia and pull itself away from reality. Extremely common in trauma. If you've ever been through a trauma, a bad car wreck, I hope you haven't, but if you have, you've been through something really, really severe, and you probably are missing chunks of that event. Or there's things you remember that other people are like, that's not how it went, dude. That's dissociative amnesia. It's very, very common. Now the last one, dissociative identity disorder. Okay. This has been a raging topic in psychology since the 60s as to whether or not it's even real. There are psychologists out there that will go to their graves saying that dissociative identity disorder is nothing short of malingering, faking it. And then there are people who have staked their entire careers and their well-being and their states on the fact that they believe it is real. I'm going to tell you what the idea behind it is. And I will also tell you this: if you make a conclusion based on what I'm saying here, oh, I think it's real, oh, I think it's not real, you're missing the boat. Because I'm telling you right now, this has been a conversation that's been going on for almost 60 years, no, not quite 60, I don't know, 60 years. It's been going on for a very long time. The truth is, at least from my point of view, it's probably sometimes real and sometimes not, right? Just like everything else. But here's how it goes. Okay. Remember I told you during a traumatic event, sometimes your mind will dissociate for you and pull you out of it. In the case of dissociative identity disorder, a traumatic event or a continued traumatic experience, let's say an abusive childhood, is so bad and the person dissociates so far that the mind comes in and sticks a whole new person in the body and says, you are here to take the abuse, to take the trauma, to take the triggers, to take the thing for the core mind, which we are protecting. So in the case of dissociative identity disorder, let's say you've got a subject who as a child was very, very badly abused and beaten. or whatever. Terrible things happen to this person. I'll let you fill in the blanks. And in order to protect the mind, in order to protect the person from becoming suicidal or having other things happen, the mind dissociated, and it had to dissociate to the point where it actually created a new personality to defend the core personality, to protect it, to act as a barrier. In that situation, the core personality very often does not even know about the existence of the alter or the alternate personality. They rarely know about each other until they are forced to confront each other. The first alternate personality is almost always a defender. It's almost always somebody tougher, meaner, stronger than the core personality, because that personality exists to defend the core. Also, common alter personalities are sexually promiscuous personalities that engage in heavy drinking or gambling. They do all the things that the core personality wouldn't do or would threaten the core personality. If we go back to Freud and we talk about the ego, the id, and the superego, and how the ego kind of, the id is the pleasure principle and it wants what it wants right now. And the ego says, no, you can't do that. These are society's laws. And the superego finds ways to make it work for both of them. This would be like the most extreme example of Freud in play, where the person wants revenge or they want defense and they can't figure out a way to do it because it's not legal to hurt or attack or kill this person. So the mind creates a whole new personality that'll do it so that the primary personality doesn't have to do it. Dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder, has been the subject of many movies, books, mystery thrillers, the list goes on and on and on. And almost always they're very schlocky and cheesy, because it almost seems like a cheesy way out and weak writing to say, oh, well, the killer was actually this guy all along. It was just his other personality that did it. Is it possible for the human mind to fracture and create other personalities, completely different personas that may or may not even be aware the other personality exists? The jury's still out on it. The problem is the core personality often is unaware of the alter or alters, is unaware of the alter and doesn't know what the alter is doing when the alter is in control. All the core knows is all of a sudden I wake up and I'm in a strange bed, or I wake up and I'm in debt, or I wake up and I'm in jail covered in blood, or I wake up and I don't know what's going on with me. And so the psychologist will begin to talk to the core about repressed memories. The key feature in dissociative identity disorder is all those traumatic things, all that terrible stuff got taken when they were dissociated. All the memories got taken and then put into the alter. And so the alter keeps those memories to protect the core, and the core doesn't have access to those memories. And the core turns into the alter when something happens to trigger the remembrance of those memories. The idea of repressed memory that you don't remember, is pretty, it's controversial. Because what would happen a lot, or what did happen a lot, especially in the 60s and 70s, is psychologists were talking to people and convinced them that they were suffering from repressed memories, and those repressed memories were sexual abuse by their father or something like that. And then the police would get involved, and the father would end up getting arrested and charged with sexual abuse. And in a couple of cases, it turned out that's not what happened. So as a psychologist, you need to be very careful about telling somebody that you think that they're repressing a memory, because you lead them in, you can easily lead somebody, especially if somebody is in psychological crisis and they come to you for help, lead them down a path that fits some theory that you're working on, right? And that can have disastrous effects on multiple people's lives. The whole repressed memory controversy just got way out of hand, and it was, you know, hypnosis was involved, and they were saying, and there's a lot of people out there that believe in hypnosis. There's a lot of people that don't. I'll let you make your own judgments about that as you learn more. But the idea is that by putting people under in hypnosis, they could help them access those repressed memories, or they could force the alter out to talk to them and stuff. The problem is on the con side of this. The problem is a lot of this sounds like exorcism and you know, mumbo jumbo. A lot of it sounds really outlandish and out there. But then again, so did schizophrenia when we first discovered it. So I am not going to make a case for dissociative identity disorder or against it, but I am going to tell you this. One of the most popular, well, used to be one of the most popular Marvel superheroes, the Incredible Hulk. Of course, you guys have all heard of the Hulk. Before the current She-Hulk iteration thing, back when he got angry and turned into the Hulk, he was written to have dissociative identity disorder. So the idea is that when the scientist, Bruce Banner, was a little boy, his father was incredibly abusive and murdered his mom in front of him and did all sorts of these horrible, terrible things. And so as he grew up, he had dissociative identity disorder. And this alternate personality, the big green monster, actually always existed within him. And when he got mad, he would become childlike and raging and hit things and stuff. But it was ineffectual. And then through the science gone wrong, that alter received a body. And that body happened to be very large and very strong. That's the actual history of that character. And the reason why that's important is because if you look at that character and his behavior, that is exactly what a dissociative identity disorder alter is supposed to be. Very often they're childlike, they're not a fully formed personality, they really only experience one emotion, which is usually rage or anger, and they exist strictly to protect the core personality from whatever perceived harm was initially found. Other alters are supposed to be able to develop later with more formed personalities, but that first alter is almost always not even a fully formed personality. It's just a rage machine. So there you go. You didn't think I was going to bring Marvel Comics into this, did you? All right, guys. That's it for this lecture. I hope you stayed awake through it, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.